Board meeting for Thursday, February 13th is called to order at 7:02. First on the agenda is our roll call. Dr. Benoit.
Here.
Dr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Porter.
Here.
Mr. Ozier.
Here.
The chair is here. Ms. Ramos and Mr. Menard are not present. Next item is the review of the meetings from the January Planning Board meeting. If we could review the minutes of that. Have any questions or comments on them?
Move to accept as presented.
We have a motion to accept as presented. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. The meeting minutes are accepted as presented.
No, his roll.
Is any, oh, Mr. Menard. So I'm in the roll call, so actually, Mr. Menard has arrived.
I do.
Next item, do any planning board members have any, need to disclose any potential conflicts on the matters before the board this evening? Nope, hearing none. Any planning board members need to disclose any ex parte communications about any contested or material adjudicatory facts or opinions concerning the merits of any application before the board this evening? No? Excellent. So our voting members for this evening, Dr. Benoit, Dr. Roberts, Mr. Porter, Mr. Menard, and myself. So with that, we'll jump right into our first item of business. Public meeting request for extension for Rankin Estates. Can you give us a summary, Mr. Carullo?
Mr. Chairman, as you're aware, Rankin Estates has a master plan approval. The applicant was before the planning board, I believe, 2 years ago, requesting a 2-year extension to allow them to complete their applications for state permits. They are in the process of obtaining those permits, and the applicant actually is finalizing their preliminary plan submission and is getting ready to meet with the planning office, I believe, in the next 2 weeks to go over the submission package. They are here this evening asking for an additional 1-year extension. They're required to show due diligence, and I believe they'll be able to do that this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening. Michael Kelly. I represent the applicant. As you know,
Mr. Kelly, could you go to the microphone,
If you could go to
please?
the microphone.
Thank you.
Good evening. Michael Kelly. I represent the applicant. As you know, this is a very large subdivision, 220 acres, and the task of doing the test pits and getting septic approvals is a monster task, so to speak. There's literally 50 or 60 perk tests that have to be done. We've got most of those done, and it's about to be submitted to DEM. There's been a holdup. It had to be revised a couple times. The fire chief, fire department wanted that access road, which goes through a wetland, and we've been negotiating with the DEM to see how we can possibly maneuver that. And the DOT also asked us to move a couple the entrance road, and DEM also did as a result of a wetland issue. So as Mr. Carullo indicated, we're meeting with the planning department in 2 weeks. We expect to submit this within 3 to 4 months. We're asking for a year, just in case we're held up again by DEM or DOT. And so we would ask that you allow the extension for a year. And as I said, we're very close to getting this completed, and we hope to file it in the next 2 or 3 months, a complete package. We are submitting an application. We're going over it with Mr. Carullo, make sure we give him everything he wants. This is a preliminary plan. All the engineering has to be done, and you can imagine the roadways are extensive, the drainage is extensive, a lot of it is on a hill. So we would ask that, given that, and we've been working very hard. Mr. Preve, the engineer, is here if you'd like to hear from him. But that's some substance of the reasons for the request for the extension.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Any planning board members have any questions or comments based on that? Do you feel like we need to listen, to have the engineer come up and talk?
If necessary.
Well, it's necessary if we decide it's necessary,
Correct.
so,
Let's hear from the engineer, please.
okay.
Good evening. For the record, Eric Privy, P-R-I-V as in Victor E. I'm a registered professional engineer with DiPrete Engineering. Office is at 2 Stafford Court in Cranston, Rhode Island. As Attorney Kelly had mentioned, we've been going through a long diligence process to get through the engineering, both on multiple levels. Getting the survey. The survey, it's a 227-acre parcel. Going around the boundary, it's over 5 acres through the woods. Obviously, there's a lot of old driftways. There was a lot of ambiguities with the title with it as well. So getting through all of that for the boundary was very extensive for us. There was some unrecorded deeds. Test pits as well, the soil testing. There was archaeological that needed to be done as well. That was very important discussions during the master plan. And the test pits couldn't be done until the archaeological was figured out, right? You wouldn't want to be digging on the site till that was figured out and cleared. So that was an extensive process. That was over a year and a half to 2 years for the archaeological to get cleared. First of all, by the time you have to set the protocols, the state has to approve it and then go through that. Then we were able to start digging the test holes. Every lot needs 2 test holes. We had 250, we actually have 300 test holes throughout the site. Obviously, the terrain's extensive out there as well. So we've been working through it. We've been working very diligently to get this in as quickly as possible, but it's just the timeline that it takes to pull the extent of a 126 lot residential subdivision on 227 acres. So
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer any other questions, but that's kind of a
Okay.
brief overview of it.
Anything from the board? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Privy.
You're welcome.
So the matter before us this evening is simply whether or not to grant the extension. So, do we have any further discussion among the board on that? Then I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to grant the 1-year extension.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Roll call vote. Dr. Benoit?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Menard?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next 2 items on the agenda are for the Unified Development Review for Trout Brook Lane. What we typically do when we have both parts is let you do your presentation on both parts, but then we'll ask our questions, open a public hearing, and vote on each one separately. Okay? Mr. Krill, you want to give an intro on that?
Nope, you've explained that aptly. This is an application for a unified plan review. The applicant is going to be looking for a dimensional variance for less than required frontage and lot width on the cul-de-sac, as well as a minor subdivision where they're kind of exchanging properties between 3 property owners and providing access to the applicant to build a single house on the back of that very large piece of property. The attorney will get into the details of a little bit of the history of the property, and I'm sure the surveyor will go into his work.
Good evening. My name is Cale Keeble. I'm legal counsel for Mr. Peliquin. This, what we're proposing here tonight, would resolve over a decade of litigation that does include the town of North Smithfield. When the development was built, little entries to the abutting owners, these small access points were kept. Oh, thank you. Is there? I'll let you handle the technology. There was some dispute as to whether that was a town-accepted road or not, or to be an extension for a town-accepted road. And that led to, at times, a bit of dispute. But that's in the past. The good news is The three abutting landowners, Messrs. Branchard, Fontaine, and Pelican, got together, cooler heads prevailed, and they worked out a proposal whereby Mr. Pelican will not build the 4 lots on his large piece of land that he does have preliminary plan approval for now. Instead, Mr. Pelican will give here and here some buffer zone land to his neighbors to increase their privacy. And this has been moved around a little bit. That will be a driveway to one single-family home in the back. And that will resolve the litigation. All the parties are in agreement. All 3 parties have signed the subdivision application. And it's really, you know, a rare win-win-win, sort of a win situation. And I think everybody deserves a little credit for having cooler heads prevail on it. With me is Mike Darvo from Darvo Surveying. He did all of this work and interacted with the parties too.
Because this is part zoning also, do I need to be sworn in?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. My name is Michael Darvo. I'm a registered professional land surveyor. My office is at 786 Great Road here in North Smithfield. And we were hired to survey the 3 parcels that are shown behind us in the process of, I'm sorry, actually 4 parcels because of the small area here that is jointly owned by this parcel and this parcel. So there's actually 4 parcels.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, did I hear that you're also hearing the zoning aspect now?
Yes, we are hearing both.
Then I'm sorry, then the gentleman does
Oh,
need to be
all
sworn
right.
in.
Would you do that, please?
Yes, and we
I'm
usually
sorry.
do that. Just raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth before this board tonight?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So in reality, this application is taking 4 lots and creating 3 lots will be the end result of this application. Part of what we're doing, and there's about 6 different little triangles and less than 1,000 square feet, one person to another person and so forth. But the end result is that the 3 lots will be, this will be one parcel here of about 2.5 acres. The parcel on the right, which has an existing house here, will get some land from some of the butters. And that parcel ends up being about 2.9 acres in total. The remaining part, that is this whole big piece in here, is about 8.5 acres or so. This large parcel currently has a 21-foot access to Pound Hill Road. The problem with that is that all wetlands over there. So for them to access Pound Hill Road, they've got to cross wetlands out to in here somewhere. So some wetlands up here, this is a stream, which has some associated wetlands also. So there's a significant crossing there and so forth, a lot of environmental impact. The proposal is to provide them with 25 feet of access to Trutbrook Lane. That'll give them width for a driveway, utilities, and so forth. That'll be their one access, just one house lot. We didn't make it 50 feet, so you can't put a road in there, right? It's just stayed at 25, which is sufficient for a roadway and associated improvements. And in essence, that's the proposal. Obviously, all of the zone, I guess since it's zoning, all of the zoning components were part of the planner's report, so I don't know if I should just repeat all that, or is that going to be read into the record for zoning?
Could you go through the variance, what you're looking
Yeah,
for in
unfortunately,
dimensional relief?
I would read whatever the planner had word for word, to be honest with you. He did a great job on
Okay,
it.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I apologize, I don't remember all the new requirements that just came into effect, so.
That's right, neither do we. So,
All right, well, we'll go through them.
Mr. Chairman, the dimensional variance that they're looking for is related to the frontage on the cul-de-sac of Trout Brook Lane, as well as lot width. The requirement in the REA zoning district is 200 feet, and as the surveyor had mentioned, they'll be providing 25 feet of frontage. With regard to the relief that they're looking for, the hardship is due to the unique characteristics of the property because of the existing layout of the property. It's not something that was caused by the property owner himself. It's something that was the result of a subdivision that was approved years ago. As has been mentioned earlier, the subdivision at that time did include a stub end to allow a provision for access to that property. However, that stub end was never deeded to the town and was subsequently sold to the abutters and blocked this property owner's access to the property. So clearly, there's a hardship. Clearly, the hardship is not the result of any action that he performed. The variance altering the general characteristics, it's a single-family subdivision. He's building a single family on a substantially oversized lot. So it would comply with the existing zoning in the area. The dimensional relief is necessary for him to realize a beneficial use of the property, because without that relief, he would not be able to access, nor would he be able to build on his property. I think that's the criteria for this, and that would be my analysis of the criteria.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Carrillo.
Thank you, Mark.
So with that, any questions or comments from the board before we open up the public hearing?
I have a question.
Dr. Benoit?
Mr. Darvo, the access, 25 feet,
Yes.
paved asphalt driveway, will that be able to support a fire truck loaded, a tanker fire truck to serve that property?
Yeah, it'll be like most driveways. It'll be about 15, 16 feet wide, which is wide enough for a fire apparatus and so forth, just like any single-family house has.
I'm not concerned with the width, I'm concerned about the weight-bearing capability
Well, it'll have to be built to the standards that are required, yes.
of a driveway.
Yes.
That's not a road.
Well, it's not, it's a private driveway.
I understand,
You,
but sometimes circumstances may require some deviation from the standard driveway. If a fire truck is going to break down in the middle of the access, they won't be able to reach the site of the incident. That's my concern.
okay, so what I would say is, if you would put a requirement that the fire department approve the driveway before the building permit?
There we go.
That's where I'm
Is that,
going.
is that okay,
Okay.
Bill?
Great.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for the engineer? Okay, then I'll look for a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Okay, do we have a second? Those in favor? Aye. The public hearing is open at 7:21. If anyone wishes to speak, please come up to the podium, introduce yourself, direct any questions and comments to the board, and from there, we will, take your comments, and then we'll get them answered for you. Go ahead.
Hello, good evening, Erica Millette. I'm in a butter on this side, this line here. So I just had a couple of questions, more than concerns. I didn't hear if a length of the driveway was stated.
Okay.
Sorry if I missed that. And I was also just wondering if there is an actual plan for where the house or the building would be placed. Just because there's sloping and like how close to the
Sure.
wetlands.
Okay,
So those would be my questions. but
okay.
I realize you may not have the answer.
And we'll leave it for the engineer to answer those. Yes, please.
So there's no actual plan for an actual house right now. We have done soil testing with DEM in the middle of the lot, right about this area, where we had good water tables and the soils are sufficient for a septic system. actually a large one if you needed to even, and so forth. This lot is subject to any other lot as far as the zoning setbacks, right? 20, was it 50, 40 in the front, et cetera, and that would be the requirements. I think the game plan is to put the house kind of in this area here at this time, but it's not definite yet. You know, the lot does slope from here down to here. We want to stay out of DEM's jurisdiction so we don't have to you know, apply to DEM for any wetland relief. DEM will frown upon that if, with all this land that's available, to put a house near their wetland, so I don't foresee that happening. But somebody that buys a property like this is gonna want the house with some privacy and so forth, right in the middle of the lot, for the most part.
Right. And how long is the driveway? That was the other question.
Well, the driveway will be, it's about 200, 250 feet to where it opens up, so probably about 500 feet or so.
Altogether? Okay.
Somewhere in
Thanks.
there.
Does that answer your questions?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Again, the style of the house and, you know, a lot of factors that haven't been determined yet could change that a little bit. But I don't see it significantly changing.
Right. Okay. Any other questions regarding this project?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Those in favor? Aye. Unopposed? Public hearing is closed at 7:24. Thank you. So we need to first vote on the dimensional relief, and pending the outcome of that, we would move on to the second part. So any further discussion on the dimensional relief?
Mark, with Dr. Benoit's concern about the fire department having approval of the driveway construction, would that fall under our zoning vote or as a stipulation, or the other?
It would fall under the subdivision.
Okay. Thank you.
And I've penciled something in very quickly that I'll offer when we come to the
Okay.
subdivision vote for
Perfect.
the benefit of Dr. Benoit.
All right, then I'm going to make a motion that we approve the requested dimensional variances with the following stipulations. That number one, approval of the dimensional variance is conditional upon approval of the proposed minor subdivision, and that the property lot shall be limited to one residential building due to limited access to the property.
Mr. Vice Chairman, could you adopt the findings as provided by the planner?
Yep, and adopt the findings as recommended by the planning office.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
And we have a second. Roll call vote. Dr. Benoit?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Menard?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So next up is the second part of the Unified Development Plan.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would offer a third stipulation, that driveway construction shall be approved by the North Smithfield Fire Department for adequate access and an ability to support the weight of fire apparatus.
Is that wording?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. So with that added stipulation, is there any discussion around the preliminary approval? No? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion then.
Everybody's jumping tonight. I'll make a motion to adopt.
Make the sick guy do it.
I know, right? I'll make a motion that we grant preliminary approval with the following stipulations as outlined by the planning department, as well as adopting the planning office findings that are outlined in, consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. Roll call vote. Dr. Benoit?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Menard?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So it's approved. All right, thank you. Okay, next, I might as well just switch, do it on paper here. Great. Next item on our agenda, public meeting, amendment to the to the zoning ordinance text and town zoning map. Mr. Carullo, if you could give us your introduction, please.
Mr. Chairman, this is a request for a zone change related to a business currently active in the town of North Smithfield. There is pending action in the Superior Court with regard to the functioning of the sand and gravel business. And the applicant is trying to they're trying to resolve the issue with a recommended zone change, but one of their obligations is to exhaust their administrative remedies, and this is one of the actions that is available to them. So they are looking to create a new zoning district to address the existing conditions on the property. This will be a recommendation from the planning board to the town council. Is not a vote to affirm or deny this application, simply forwarding it to the town council for consideration with regard to compliance with the comprehensive plan. And you'll see I went through and provided an analysis of the plan, as well as should the planning board see to forward this to the town council, I've recommended several stipulations related to the zone change.
Okay. Thank you. Could you, is anybody presenting on this? Yes. Okay, there we go. Thank you.
Good evening. William Landry. I'm a partner with Blish and Kavanaugh in Providence, and I'm representing Pound Hill Realty. My clients and co-counsel on this matter have not arrived yet. I think they may have thought it was going to be reached much later in the agenda. I think we're 9 or 10. Here we go. Okay. So we do have a slide or two we'd like to put up on the just to make this a little more efficient.
Yep.
We just started. Ryan. Yeah, I think we thought it would be a little bit later.
Yeah, I thought it would be a little later. Sorry about that, everybody. I had paper copies for the board as well. Let's do this.
Final Jeopardy music. Is it really?
Oh, you got it. Third time was gonna be a charge. Oh, there we go. You ready, Bill? I think so. Yeah, sure. We good? Okay. We can go right to the. Can everybody see that okay? Is that, should we dim the lights or, well, maybe let's. There you go. A little bit better.
That's good.
Thank you for your patience. As the planner mentioned, this matter is here for an advisory recommendation to the council on a text amendment to the zoning ordinance that would also involve a zone change to the zoning map. It relates to this almost 90-acre piece of property, the sand and gravel operation that's been in effect for about 75 years. The question is asked, why are we seeking a text amendment to the zoning ordinance at this point with respect to this property? And it's because as I'll explain to you in a moment, the zoning on the property the zoning ordinance is really not a helpful tool for understanding the status of the zoning of the property. If this were a new quarrying sand and gravel operation, it would be easy. We've got a zoning ordinance, we've got an earth removal ordinance, we've got a soil and sedimentation ordinance, there are licensing requirements associated with those provisions. A new proposal would be easy to diagnose. But this isn't a new proposal. There was some material circulated about this proposal that indicated we're going to say no again to quarrying like we did in 1979. Well, the problem is that this property has been quarried for over 70 years. It was already a quarry and a mining operation 70 years ago. And when zoning came into effect and earth removal ordinances and soil and sedimentation ordinances, they were grandfathered like other grandfathered uses that still exist within this town. So it's not helpful to say, well, we don't want to have this operation. It does have grandfather rights that are associated with it, and they're important. It is 89 acres. One of the reasons that the non-conforming legal status of the property is important is that it's a compilation of multiple parcels that have been combined by operation of law. The law has required them to be merged and treated as zoning as one lot. And most of the entire parcel, except for a small piece, is subject to these pre-existing non-conforming rights. Now, when we think of pre-existing non-conforming rights, most of us think about a gas station in a residential zone that clearly can continue to operate as a gas station, but it can't have 3 bays. If it has 2 now, it can't be made twice the size as the gas station was before. But as long as it's operating at about the same size as it did before, it has the right to go on indefinitely as long as it doesn't matter what the zoning ordinance provides. Earth removal and mining operations
excuse me?
are different.
It'd be best if you spoke at the microphone so that everybody can hear you.
Earth removal and quarrying operations are different when it comes to non-conforming uses. In every state in the United States, Rhode Island is no different than anywhere else. Mining is something called a diminishing asset operation. And when the activity of mining involves blasting and digging and removing soil, so that you're actually expanding your operation every day in some way. The whole act of the non-conforming use requires expansion because you're taking more and more of the property. So the rules about expansion of mining type uses are not the same as other uses, because if you said you couldn't quarry the property, you wouldn't be able to put that next bucket or blasting that next area the day after a new zoning ordinance went into effect. It would basically take away your grandfather rights and accomplish a taking of the property. So the rules around mining and quarrying and other diminishing asset operations are that you can generally go to the property line as long as there was mining that had occurred in portions of that over time. It's not you can go right to the edge of the property line. And this is one lot for zoning purposes. The zoning ordinance requires the whole 89 acres to be considered as one lot. So that's the context here. There has been 30 years of litigation over this property that has had a number of effects, none of which has been to really clarify the nature of the zoning. But mostly, the operation has zoned itself over that time. The operation has continuously operated. It's got road use permits. It's operated as an existing business. But it really hasn't been subject to any type of oversight by the town. It's very heavily regulated by other jurisdictions, EPA, DEM, mine safety. This property is one of the most heavily regulated pieces of property in the state of Rhode Island. But from the town's regulatory perspective, it's kind of the wild, wild west. And we understand that it's very difficult for town officials to deal with an abutter who may come in and say, gee, I've got dust on my property, isn't anybody regulating this? There's a lot of noise over there. Can they really be digging out that area? Are they causing problems for the Superfund sites that are next to us? When those questions are asked, the town's been historically unable to answer those questions because there really is no town oversight over the operation. And the town doesn't get copies of all of the regulatory inspections by the EPA or by DEM, any violation notices by mine safety. They're in the dark about the regulation of this property, and there are no real controls on how far it can go and how it might interrupt the adjoining use patterns. There's very little residential development nearby, but we think it's important that there's residential development and want to protect it. So we're at this juncture after 30 years of litigation where there isn't a clear answer on the future of the site. The court has sent us back to the town to come up with a solution, either in the form of a use variance or a text amendment to the zoning ordinance. And we have chosen the option of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance because that is what we think would be the best balance and the most practical way to proceed, and the way to proceed that we feel would probably be the town's preference over a use variance. If a use variance is granted by the zoning board, it means that we continue, based on grandfather rights or based on the fact that this property is really not suitable for anything else. If we could put the map back up, Ryan, thanks. The property's not suitable for the only use that it's zoned for, which is residential estates. No one's going to build residential estates on this property. There's no water or sewer infrastructure to the property. It's not feasible or economical. It's highly regulated. You almost need an industrial operation to maintain the stormwater controls that are protecting the adjoining properties from the Superfund sites that are around the property. So we feel that if we ask for a use variance and got it, then we'd have the right to use the property as a sand and gravel operation. And there wouldn't necessarily be any definition of that. But if it's done by way of a text amendment and a map change that creates a new planned district on this site, makes the site a planned site by the town, that allows this historic use that's allowed by operation of law anyway, but that has certain controls on that use, how far it can go, the buffering, the screening from adjoining properties, the oversight that has to now be given to the town that it didn't have before, the requirement that we provide copies of all of our licenses, all of our permits from the state, the federal government, every year provide to you a chronology of any interactions with any of our regulators, any complaints, any violation notices, any new activity, so that the town now has automatically an ability to understand everything that's happening on the property and to be able to respond to it. And we're building in buffers that don't presently exist. So that was the reason for the text amendment approach. And it's complicated. We had an initial work session with the town council on Monday night of this week. We asked this board for a work session also because it is complicated. And we didn't want to put any board or council in the position of having to make a decision in one night on something that's this complicated, where we're proposing a number of conditions to a zone change, and there may be other conditions or different conditions that the town prefers more. So we found ourselves on Monday night, and we were the only thing on the agenda, unlike tonight, spending the whole time just explaining what we're doing, explaining the property a little bit, why we're doing it the way we're doing it, and what the conditions of this text amendment will be. And that took up a lot of time. And the council itself registered that we can't make a decision on this next Tuesday. You're going to the planning board. We've got to have some back and forth. We've got to have some work sessions. We've got to have some time. And the point we made there that I'd like to reiterate tonight and make it very clear is that we know that this isn't something you're going to be able to decide on tonight. It's not something the council's going to be able to decide on Tuesday night. We've already indicated that we would start a hearing process at the town, but that it would be continued to a later date, that we would agree to extend the statutory time periods that the planning board and the council have to deal with these matters, so that this isn't a race here. Those time periods are meant to protect the applicants, and we understand that this isn't going to work unless we have a process of collaboration where there can be some back and forth and where people have the time to make good decisions. We knew you had a lot of items on your agenda tonight. We had a couple of experts that wanted to come here tonight and explain things. One of them's out of state and couldn't get here. The other just had hernia surgery and wasn't mobile tonight. We do expect that they will probably make it to the council on Tuesday for that session. They'll certainly be here at any other workshops or sessions that the planning board wants to have. But that's my big emphasis here. We'd like to explain what we're doing here and why, and lay out the land for you, and explain the amendment, and then give you some time to digest it, and then pursue a direction that you may help us define. So with that, I'll go back to the map and try to provide the lay of the land a little bit using the microphone. This is our 90 acres. Just to the west is the Western Sand and Gravel Superfund site, a highly contaminated site at one point. Just below that is an operation that does customized truck bodies. As you move up further, you've got the brook, and then further north, mostly off of this slide, is the Wilson Resource and Recovery Superfund site. So we're almost surrounded by two Superfund sites that have a history of significant contamination. You know, residential use on our property is really not in the question. I don't think anybody would debate that. Over on the west side of the site, we've got this area here, which looks like there are pockets of vegetation or something, and then rows in between them. Those are actually rows and rows of stacked salvage automobiles that are part of the North Smithfield auto salvage operation. That's our abutter there. And as we come down to this area, we don't have a house that's within 600 feet of us, but there are a couple of houses in this area and a couple more here that are accessed by Douglas Pike down in this direction. So we're really hemmed in, compromised. There will never be residential estates on this property, so the zoning should recognize some other suitable use, and we think that this use is actually the best use of the property. We've talked about the oversight and the need for transparency. So those are the real big things here. When you have a property that's been kind of off the screen for so many years, you don't have the ability to do any planning with respect to that property. And this is the planning board, the planning advisory function to the council. Our request is that the town consider planning for the future of this site and not moving from into another black hole through another process like a use variance, or leaving things the way they are, where you've been constant litigation for decades without being able to plan the site or really have much jurisdiction over it. So why don't we move to the next couple of sites and see what we've got here. There are several comprehensive plan provisions that relate to this. The staff report prepared by planning notes that it's not a new proposal, so a lot of what's in the comprehensive plan doesn't really apply here. There's a notation in the comprehensive plan that this REA zone should be focused on aquifer protection. There are sensitive reservoirs in the area, and that's a big part of what we're actually doing on this site, and I'll explain that further in a moment. There are also, the comprehensive plan also recognizes that in this area is less than 10% developed, this residential estate agriculture, and that most of it consists of Superfund sites, Holliston Sand and Gravel operation, which is to the north of us, the intense auto body uses and other salvage uses, and that any future use has to take into consideration that that's the context of the property, and that speaks to the point that there aren't going to be houses here. So there should be a plan B for this property. The comprehensive plan also laments the town's the absence of significant opportunities for economic expansion of industrial uses, advocates being creative and looking at areas for the expansion of industrial uses. I will tell you that this property is a community asset. The stone, the granite that comes from this property and the sand that come from this property are highly sought after regionally. We meet the specifications for a lot of complicated types of stone for seawalls, revetments, beach sand. There's a light beach sand that's available here that in massive quantities on this property that's highly desirable. And it's utilized by many adjoining municipalities, Rhode Island DOT, Connecticut DOT, Massachusetts DOT, the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's hard to find these resources. And the property's been operating, as I mentioned, for 75 years without any genuine, honestly, without any genuine complaint about the way it's operating, regulatory issues with the way it's operating, and there's tremendous regulatory oversight of what's going on here. So what we're proposing, the structure of this amendment is to create a new overlay for this property and this property only. Someone else could try to do this for some other property, but this property is so unique that we're proposing a special management district, and we've called it the Industrial 1 Special Management District, ISM 1. That would recognize that quarrying and sand and gravel operations and related accessory uses are a permitted use on the property, and that would help clarify what already is dictated by law, we believe, but the rubber meets the road here with the conditions of this zone change. It would have to start with a development plan approval by this planning board of a site plan for the property. And you know what that's all about. If we can go back to the plan. Yeah, to the map. The map is actually a plan that shows a number of types of conditions that would be associated with this use. We'd have a 50-foot buffer from the area where the adjoining lands are, and again, these houses are 600 feet away. So there'd be extensive vegetation that would step up. There'd be a large berm created in that area, and that would help provide something that doesn't exist right now, a permanent vegetative barrier for the very few houses that are located adjacent to us, and this board would be very much involved in that. We'd also focus on benching and stepping. So much of this site is already so thoroughly mined that you can't go backwards and step and bench your excavation of the rock. But that is possible with respect to the progressing excavations, and so that there's a more planned and intelligent and transparent stepping and benching opportunity for the future quarrying that takes place. So that site plan approval would be is a condition of this proposed ordinance. Secondly, we would, even though we're not subject to the soil and erosion and sediment control ordinance, most of which is focused on keeping sediments and potential pollutants out of the water resources in this area, which are extensive, we would provide a report every year by the 31st of December in writing that describes any issues that were encountered with respect to soil, sedimentation, drainage. Again, we're thoroughly regulated by DEM, but we'd have to provide an explanation of what we've done to continue to protect the underlying aquifer. We would also provide, within 30 days of the amendment, and by the end of December on every year, copies of all of our state permits, inspection reports, notices of violation, any encounter or activity we've had with EPA, DEM, mine safety, or anyone else during the preceding 12 months. We would continue to meet all of the requirements of our road use permits. We currently have heavy equipment road permits for this operation. There's certain conditions to that. There are bonds that need to be filed. We have to coordinate what we're doing with school bus activity and so forth. We would continue to be subject to that. We're not subject to the noise ordinance now, but we would make ourselves subject to the noise ordinance outside of a pre-established set of hours of operation. And we had proposed in our ordinance 7 a.m. to 6, Monday through Friday, Saturday 7 to 4:30, and no activity on Sundays and legal holidays. There were one member of the council wanted that to coincide more with what the road use permit requires now. I think that may be 5 o'clock or 5:30, and to try to moderate the use on Saturday to an earlier time, which is fine with our client. There's not a lot going on there on Saturdays right now, but that's something that they would impose upon themselves as part of this. And there may be other things that also should be introduced as protective measures as a condition to any text change, and that's what we'll be looking for, for your input on, and hoping we could have at least one work session to explore those types of things. Once you've heard a little bit more about the property, I do want to say that one of the byproducts of not really having any transparency or oversight is that there are some myths that can grow with respect to these types of properties that are kind of off the radar. And we're going to spend some time in this process trying to present what's really true, because some of the things that have been said almost border really kind of reckless and border on the defamatory. So I think it's important for you to understand what the environmental condition of our property is and how hard this industrial operation works to maintain the balance in this highly contaminated area in a way that's highly desirable to EPA and DEM, that would go away if there wasn't an industrial presence here that required those steps to be maintained. By way of example, if we could go back to the map. In this portion of the property, closest to Western Sand and Gravel, which is very heavily contaminated, there are a series of berms and retention ponds. Someone that I'm sure just didn't know, but they sent around a picture to people in the neighborhood saying, this is where the aquifer was breached by the sand and gravel operation. Nothing could be further from the truth. That is a system of berms and ponds that were deliberately placed there in order to capture runoff from the hills, manage that runoff, infiltrate the stormwater into the groundwater so that it does not have a negative effect. Those berms were built to the delight and with the approval of EPA and DEM. These allegations have been shared with them. They have had no impact on the EPA and DEM. No, we have a zero discharge permit from DEM that it's still called a discharge certificate, that there's no water or contaminants, certainly no contaminants, being discharged from this property such that we don't need any stormwater permits or controls beyond the ones that have been engineered. It's very hard to get a discharge permit that confirms that your activities are perfect in terms of protecting the balance. The truth is that the water flow, the hydraulic flow of the water in this area is from east to west. And that series of ponds and berms serves as an anchor to block any backflow of contaminants from that site. There are no contaminants on this site. The water quality is drinking water quality everywhere where it's been tested, and it's tested constantly. Clean water here, a system to create a barrier and provide protection from what's going on this property and to keep that stabilized. It requires a lot of maintenance. That maintenance is performed. It's part of the industrial process that's been taking place on this property for decades. That system was initially constructed in the 1960s and continues to be perfected hand in hand with the regulatory authorities. So there's been no breach. The Western Sand and Gravel is up gradient of where we are. So there's no way that anything that we're doing would ever drain over onto that property and cause any type of difficulties over there. And the same thing with the brook. We have an environmental scientist who's been working on this for decades that said it would be impossible for this site, the way it's engineered and maintained from a stormwater perspective, to cause any damage to that brook and certainly to the reservoir above it. And it takes a business on the site to maintain these drainage structures, and it's a very expensive proposition. There's also been some questions raised about dust and silica and cancer-causing agents. We'll have Richard Grohl here, who since 2003 has been involved. He's a industrial seismologist. Again, a highly regulated activity by the state. He's got all of the blasting logs that there have been on this property since 2015, even though he's been working it since 2003. The blasting protocols are met to the T. The blasting doesn't occur on a constant basis. The blasting levels that have occurred on this property are generally 1/2 or less of what is permitted to occur on the property, half of the impacts of blasting. And the rock is granite. The silica content of granite is very low. It's not a factor in any type of health issue in any way. When people say that when it gets windy and we see the white silica, what they're talking about is the white beach sand that is in great supply on this property, and that sometimes, notwithstanding our clients' best efforts to constantly water and meet all the required protocols that they've never been cited for not adhering with 100%, sometimes on a windy day, that sand is going to blow around just like it does at the beach, but there's no health issue associated with sand. It can't be ingested in the lungs. It's not the silica danger that people have assumed was resulting from these activities. The employees who work right on the site are monitored. They wear monitors. Everything is calibrated and measured to be sure that the Office of Mine Safety is involved in this. We're going to have a gentleman who spent almost his entire career at the Office of Mine Safety that's intimately familiar with these requirements and the health and safety aspect of operating an industrial operation like this, and they're all followed to the T. So we have that ahead of us in the very, very near future. as we continue this review process. So that's pretty much what we wanted to say as an introduction to acquaint you with what we're doing and why we're doing it. I would invite any comments you might have tonight. I would respectfully request that we have the opportunity to continue this discussion at your next meeting, at the end of it, or at any point, or at a work session between now and when you next formally meet.
All right. Before we get into our questions and comments, I'm assuming everybody here is not just for the entertainment value. So we're going to open up a public meeting. Before we do that, I'd just like to set the guidelines for it. So each person, raise your hand. When I recognize you, it's your turn. I'll try to keep track of which order they're in. Come up to the podium, introduce yourself, direct all questions and comments to the board. The board will keep track of them. When we're all done, then we'll have the applicant, come in to do that. The other thing I'll ask, since how many of you have something to say? Only a few of you, okay. I will say, some of you may have things to say as the evening goes on. Be succinct, be to the point, be respectful. If you come up after a person who has said something that you wanted to say yourself, simply point out that you agree so we don't have to repeat them, okay? And that's how we'll keep this moving along. All right? Good.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to open up the public hearing. Make a motion to open up the public hearing.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the public hearing is open at 8:12. Who would like to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a note. I made the same note to the public who appeared at the council's work session. And although the public is appearing at your meeting and you made it a public hearing, everybody should know that the official public hearing record begins on the 18th of February. So if you want to be on the record of the public hearing, you need to get your comments on that 18th or any date thereafter that the council continues. I just don't want people to come here think that what they've said tonight is being heard by the council. They may be listening, but you want them to listen, you've got to get that information to the council, either in writing or come to that meeting.
Okay.
I'm not trying to deter anybody from speaking. I just want you to know you may need to speak more than once.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? You may need to
Yeah.
speak
Well,
again.
I just got my piece to say, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Solicitor. Thanks for that clarification. Thank you.
My name is Robert Bellumer. I live at 219 Old Oxford Road in North Smithfield. I've been there since 2000. I moved here in 2000. I just got I want to give you a little history, just about 2 minutes of history. When I moved here in 2000, I found I had a well that was producing a lot of sand. So I had a guy come down and look at he was going to go down and fix the bottom of my well. I don't know, put a blast down there, whatever, to open up a pocket big or whatever. He couldn't get in there because half the superstructure on top, the earth and the stone on top had moved and collapsed the hole. It was like a half a moon. He couldn't get the pump out. He couldn't get anything. He says, what the hell happened here? He says, it looks like you had some kind of a big movement that took place over here and closed up the hole. So I had to put a new well in. That was all right. It was expensive, but I put it in anyways. So that went on and went on and went on and went on. Suddenly I started finding cracks in my walls. I have an A-frame house with cathedral ceilings, and I'm getting cracks in the walls. So now I have a guy who comes down every time they're going to blast and puts some meters on my house to see if there's any structure going on. Because every time it blasts, my wife jumps up in the air. It feels like the house is shaking. But, it's all right. We're well within the limits. Well, I have to tell you, I don't think we're within the limits. It's very nice to have someplace that's producing money for us and so on. But this just gets on more and more and more. And I was at the city council meeting the other day, and apparently they don't have any permits to work over here to put in the stuff that they put in there, crushers and all this stuff. I know the lawyer made a very nice presentation. I think he did a great job. And I can't fight him. All I can do is tell you guys that there's got to be some more to look into this. When I made I complained to the state of Rhode Island, that's when this geologist started showing up and taking these samples. I guess he's the guy who's going to come over here. And, you know, I get nowhere. I had a guy from the mine over there with the geologist. I talked to him right in front of my house. He's, oh, that doesn't happen around here. That's just your house. Your house is settling and the ground must be moving over here and so on. Sure it is. I'm right in the blast direction. I'm not next door, but every time they go, you can feel the house moving and shaking. My neighbors are all complaining. So that's just my opinion. I'm going to say it to the council again. So that's all I guess I've got to say. And I'm very unhappy with the whole situation. I don't know if I can ever sell this house. This is ridiculous. This is becoming a site that's not a nice neighborhood, nice country home any longer. These guys want to increase this, and I know they want to make some money. But we have to look at you guys who are going to look at this with a different eye and say, well, yeah, we're going to grant an increased permit, increased area for these guys to work on, and we're going to watch them. Well, God bless you, and thanks for listening.
One thing I would recommend, you said you had someone putting monitors on your house.
Oh, yeah.
I would just recommend getting the results of that to share
Well,
with...
he works for them.
Oh, okay.
He works for them.
I still think it'd be good.
I
still
So
think
you don't
it'd
have
be
a
good-
bone in this fight, do you? He says, he works for them. He's a company that's hired by them to work for them.
Well, the results would probably still be, you know, factual stuff to bring to the town council. That's what I'm saying. But I do recommend you, as Mr.
And I'm not a
Igliozzi said.
geologist. I just know what I
Right.
feel, what happens when a house makes a little rock, or it looks like the house it's not dancing, but it
but
feels
as-
like it's dancing.
But as Mr. Igliozzi said, please bring your thoughts to the town council meeting next Tuesday.
I won't be the only one, I'll bet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Rebecca DeCristofaro. I am speaking as the resident of 1931 Pound Hill Road, as an abutter to the Pound Hill Road quarry. I come before you today to share my personal experiences and my understanding of the amendment, comprehensive plan, and the Pound Hill Road quarry that abuts my 7-acre horse farm and home. After dreaming about owning a horse farm for as long as I can remember, my twin sister and I purchased 1931 Pound Hill in 2016. To our surprise, the very first weekday after purchase, we noticed the parade of dump trucks using the residential access road to what we later understood to be a quarry. People asked why we purchased land next to a quarry. The quarry was not disclosed to us during the sale, and there is absolutely no signage regarding the business on Route 7 to Pound Hill Road. Over the last few years, we've seen an increase in truck traffic, an increase in blasting, an increase in noise as a result of the increase in trees raised along the buffer areas. We're seeing a lot of increases occurring, but it seems like they're increases to the profit of the business and to the detriment of the residents in the area. There's no quiet Monday through Saturday. No quiet Monday through Saturday. Starting at 6 a.m. in the morning, my whole house hums from the vibration of the processing plant that they start up an hour before the ordinance allows. 7 a.m., the truck parade starts, where everyone within the vicinity can hear J-brakes and exhaust from dump trucks. Before my time on the road, there used to be a 20-truck limit per day, and that has since been long lost, and now we're seeing upwards of 100 trucks a day. I bought a farm to enjoy living in a residential agricultural area, and all I hear Monday through Saturday is the constant beep, beep, beep of trucks moving around the quarry, the constant crushing of stone, and the constant noise nuisance of processing machinery. Each day, I enjoy my farm less and less. Truthfully, had I known the quarry was there, I would have never purchased this property. And with that said, I can't, in good faith, sell my property to someone with the same dream as myself and my sister, to enjoy their horses in their backyard and to own a farm that they're truly proud of, with the ever-present nuisance of this quarry next door. And also, too, with the hazards of living next to this, what I feel are the hazards of living next to this quarry next door. And I say hazards for two reasons. According to our most recent groundwater protection overlay map, as well as the preceding maps, we know that the area under the quarry and the surrounding area is over an aquifer recharge zone. An aquifer recharge zone recharges the aquifer water source. Based on my understanding of our aquifer map, the aquifer recharge zone makes up roughly 45% of our town's water. A quick Google search will show you the implications of quarrying over an aquifer and the implications of blasting over an aquifer. I also heard for the first time the other night that surrounding residents were getting water delivered to their houses because the water in the area is contaminated. Well, that's news to me, since I can assure you that I have a well and I do not have any water deliveries that I've known for the last 2 years coming to my home. I also know that my neighbors have wells and they do not have water delivered. And if this is the case, then this is concerning, and I feel that our town should look into it. And I'm hoping that this was just an assumption that was made and not knowledge that this business has been privy to and that the residents have not been made aware of. We talked a little bit, or rather the lawyers talked a little bit about fugitive dust, and being an abutter to the quarry, there's really nothing more disconcerting than viewing rolling clouds of fugitive dust overhead or streams of fugitive dust that are blowing through the trees after each blast or on windy day. What fugitive dust means, it's dust that literally leaves the boundaries of the quarry. What fugitive dust now blows through the trees makes their ways through about 200 feet of forested buffer. I'm a little short, but you can see it right there. About 200 feet of forested buffer and roughly 3 acres of my forested land. And this business is requesting that they excavate within 50 feet of my property line, leaving a 50-foot buffer, berms, and some semblance of fencing. And not only would that buffer allowance endanger, the health and safety of my family, I feel, but it would completely degrade my property value. My 3 acres of forest would remain as the only buffer between my home and a quarry. And additionally, I also cannot sell my property without disclosing that I live next to a quarry and that I experience fugitive dust. Dust that leaves the property, regardless of what the dust contains, it leaves the property on blasts, during blasts, or on a windy day. And I'm not really sure who would readily purchase a farm and a home with that knowledge in mind. They say they have grandfathered rights to use the land and to be as noisy as they need to be based on these rights. And the grandfather rights to use the land were established pre-1979 when the area was sparsely inhabited, to quote their comprehensive analysis. It's no longer sparsely inhabited, with roughly 40 houses just in the immediate North Smithfield area of the quarry, and we now have ordinances in place to protect the growing population of our town. With that said, grandfather rights aren't grounds for business to ignore the needs of residents, the needs of our public. In my opinion, they did a comprehensive analysis, and I feel as though they picked the comprehensive plan items that best suited their analysis and proposed amendment and map change. The comprehensive plan specific to land use proposes that the buffer be increased to include the aquifer recharge area between the reservoirs and Pound Hill Road. This area encompasses the landfill and resource recovery and the Western Sand and Gravel EPA Superfund sites as a means of public health, welfare, and safety. With that said, the original plat of land pre-existed the 2 abutting Superfund sites. It did. They purchased it in 1958, as we saw in the PowerPoint presentation. The rights to quarry the original plat of land were allowed before we understood that there were Superfund sites, which which I know to have been established in the late 70s and early 80s. Thank you. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Now that we know about our Superfund sites, because the town owns they are our response, we have to be aware of them. Not considering the implications of quarrying and altering the geography of space between those 2 Superfund sites and residents is, in my mind, subjecting us to dangers. The REA zone was established to provide protection to areas where the conservation of water bodies and streams are of significant importance, and our body of water is under our feet as the aquifer recharge zone, supplying clean water to our town, and that requires protection. They quote the soil and earth removal ordinance, the section that specifically states that the soil and earth removal ordinance does not apply to several sand and gravel operations which were in operation prior to the enactment of the ordinance. We should also note that that very same section states, the town should re-examine present regulations about the underlying water resources and adjacent wetland and surface waters and the restoration of the land in a manner which will provide long-term protection. They quote the 2014 community survey, where they note that industrial growth should be encouraged. As we know, Pine Hill and Pound Hill roads are not currently industrial areas, and I imagine that that was for a good reason. And speaking of surveys, we heard in our 2019 comprehensive plan survey that we need to prioritize the protection of our air, water, and woodlands. And in my experience and opinion, the company continues to pollute our air with fugitive dust. They continue to potentially endanger our aquifer by blasting over the surface of the earth, and they've deforested hundreds of trees over the last year or so to strip away the topsoil. I'd like to conclude with this because in my mind, this isn't just a Rebecca de Cristofaro 1931 Pound Hill Road issue, I don't think. It's my understanding based on the amendments and based on what the lawyers tonight have described, and based on what was discussed in the Monday's town council meeting, that this amendment, although it's specific to this land, it really establishes precedent for existing and new businesses and developers within the town of North Smithfield. To apply for this overlay district to mine, quarry, extract, strip, cut, crush, wash, and process materials. To think that our town could allow for more residents to experience the hardships from earth mining and blasting that I experience on Pound Hill Road and other residents experience as well in the area is incredibly disheartening. Currently in East Greenwich, a local equestrian trainer who owns a beautiful and reputable riding facility is fighting for her livelihood right now and the well-being of her clients and horses because the developer purchased the abutting property and intends to blast to prepare the land for development. I looked at the East Greenwich ordinances, having been so familiar with my own ordinances in North Smithfield, with the hopes that there was something in there that would safeguard her home and her farm and her horses and her clients from the nuisance of blasting, and there are absolutely no restrictions. We have restrictions, we have ordinances, we have safeguarding in place through our ordinances to ensure that residents do not have to fight big business and developers over blasting and earth mining. And in my opinion, excuse me, recommending and in turn approving this amendment would peel back the safeguards that exist in our town, and I fear that we'll find ourselves in similar predicaments to the equestrian farm in East Greenwich, or residents will find themselves having similar experiences and concerns that I do living next door to this quarry. In my opinion, as a resident and as a member of our community, anything less than the ordinances and safeguards we have in place today will depreciate the community that we have and that we love and that we are looking to enhance and share with new and existing residents. Thank you.
Leanne Gillette, 49 Orchard Street. I live nowhere near this. However, I don't want to see it happen anymore in our town. We have ordinances, we have a comp plan, says no quarries, we have quarries, regardless of who's saying things are grandfathered and that or not. I don't believe this is falling under a grandfather clause, but I will save that until Tuesday. I do want to read a specific note that I have. In December of 2023, there was an EPA inspection completed at the WS&G site. There were captures, evidence of water runoff from the quarry through WS&G, around the campsite, and into Tarkland Pond. January 2024. EPA inspection completed again at the WS&G site. Captures evidence of quarry pumping retention pond runoff from their site back into the quarry. Also noted excavation to the southwest corner of the site had breached the aquifer. Water could be pulling from LR&R. Our aquifer, more than 2/3 of our residents have well water. That's our drinking supply. You have to save that. I'm asking you, please, do not recommend this going forward for the town council. I have a lot of other things, but again, I don't want to have to repeat them all. On Tuesday, I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Rebecca just said. There is a lot more going on. I think the presentations have been really well thought out from the attorneys. However, I can't help but feel there are underlying threats in what they're saying. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Ma'am, I believe you're next.
I'm Patty Griffin. I live on Matity Road. I'm woefully unprepared because I wasn't expecting to speak today, but I do have a lot of questions, and I'll probably be back on Tuesday when I've had time to do a little research. I agree with everything Rebecca and this other lady just said. But what I'd like to say is my family's been here since 1954 on Matity Road, closer to Log Road. So as the crow flies, over Tarkland, over the Gold Forest, and out that way. I can hear that blasting. I can almost feel that blasting. I can feel it not as strong as they would on Old Oxford or anything. I don't remember feeling or hearing that until fairly recently. So I'd like to know, when did this kind of blasting start? I mean, I feel like this business has completely ramped up in recent years. So I'd like to know what happened to empower that or to allow it. It's so much more intrusive to the residents. Yes, we all have wells. We're all worried. Wells are expensive, and it is our drinking supply. In Barville, there are a group of concerned residents who are actually suing the town council to stop putting an artificial turf field over the aquifer, because that's their drinking water. This is our drinking water too. That was not a threat by any, I'm not going to sue the town, but you know, it's very concerning when it comes to what you need to live. And we all need water, we need clean water. I'd like to propose that at some point, maybe this company, if they want to go forward, that they pay the town to get an independent expert on the silica dust and well testing, and not somebody that they've hired or with their little meters on somebody's house. I'd also like to know how specifically this company benefits our town. Are we getting a ton of tax dollars? What I'm hearing is that we're pulling what's considered a valuable resource and we're sending it off to Connecticut and Massachusetts and the Army Corps of Engineers. What I love most about this town, and always have, is the rural character. And I think that the people who live here also feel that way. And this is a grave danger to our quality of life. There's so many things that are coming to town that feel scary. Just in this little northwest corner, we're talking Rankin Estates, the Gold Solar Farm, we got the Nike site, the quarry, a couple of super funds. Where does that stop? We know so much more in this day and age about what we need to be healthy. So why are we poo-pooing any of the processes to keep us safe? And I want to know kind of how much quarrying is too much? Where does it stop? What level do you get down to? And I don't have the answers to this because I'm really, like I said, late to the game coming here. So I applaud all the people, Rebecca, all you folks who have been here and paying attention. I'm here now to pay attention and learn. And I am upset. I am noticing much more increased traffic from trucks and everything on Route 7. And they're not being careful. They're just whipping around on Route 7 like they own it. And there's also an ordinance for the peaceful enjoyment of people's property. And if this quarry goes forward the way they've been going, I don't think that that's allowing that ordinance to be in place for the residents. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Here you go, gentlemen.
Scott Walling, Greenville Road, 40 years. That name has been a nightmare for my neighborhood. It hasn't stopped. They're asking for more expansion here. They can't follow the rules now. 7 o'clock start ordinance. I can open my window at 5:45 in the morning, and I hear the plant on Greenville Road running. I called the chief of police, sorry. The chief told me to call him when I hear the operating before 7. He sends a young officer over, knocking at my door, 5 or 6. He says, I don't know why I'm here, but they told me to come because you complained. And he turned around and said to me, I know why now, because he heard the noise. I didn't have to explain to him. He got it right then and there. He wasn't told why he was coming. He was just dispatched to my house. I don't know, everybody in this town, I've been here 64 years, everything south of Pound Hill Road, if you live in Slatersville, you probably don't know what any of us are going through. We don't exist. But when they wanted the power plant in Slatersville, we helped them because that was their area problem, but it was actually the town's problem. So we need the whole town to get involved here and really think about what's going to happen here, because this opens the door. It's hell. It is hell. I thought I had it. These people got it worse. 20 trucks on a permitted road, and it's over 100. So where are those people on Pine Hill Road? Why ain't they here? What's the reason? Would you stand in your yard and just phew, phew, phew? Oh, we heed a school bus. It's a narrow road. I don't know how those people on here complaining. I don't know what they get out of that quarry or the town, because I'm sure the Weston and the Wilson hazardous waste site, and that was before my time. I don't know if that was mined or if they pulled the sand out, but almost every dump in this town, they took everything they could take out of it, then they filled it with trash and liquid hazardous waste and covered it. So 50 years ago, should the planning board or the town council stop that happen? There was no zoning. But this is a chance for this to happen again in the future, that this is now another hazardous waste site that they pulled up, being so close to those sites. So I'm asking you really to consider, this is a big thing for the town to give up. And when this gets approved, if it does, there's going to be a line of people, other people that want the same, because there's a lot of granite, a lot of ledge in this town, especially up at the end of the high school, that area, Route 7, there's a lot of quarrying that can be done. So, I mean, rather than going forward here, I would like to see them at least be humble and follow the rules. And on Route 7, when residents complain about the activity that's going on unnoticed, or nobody's doing anything about it, what do? Even if it's not a vendor going into his property, they go by his house, use the Jake brake, blow the horn, harass him because he's complaining. That's not fair either. I know we can't control that, but that's the result of this shop talk, you should say. Oh, these guys are complaining because we're operating. Now that vendor leaves and he harasses the guys on Route 7 that are complaining for their right. So all this stuff, I know you can't control that, but this is what's happening. And if this goes through, it's going to be more of that. And it's like, I don't think it's a good move for the town. And I really, every 10 years there's a little new plan. It's not a new plan. It's been 40 years. I'm still dealing with it. My daughter's going to be 37 years old this year. When I used to come home, 11 o'clock in the morning from work, when they were blasting on Greenville Road, which they weren't supposed to be, she was 5 years old, running out to the car to me, Dad, they blasted again. After working all night, owning your first piece of property as a young man, and we're trying to stop this, my 5-year-old, who's 37 this year, is telling me, Dad, they're blasting. It's been an annoyance for a long time, and if you don't live it, you don't know. And I'm hoping you look at everything. Look at the history here with this. Every town he goes to, they push the limits until they get forced out. When are we going to say no? That sign says North Smithfield. I said it before. This town belongs to us. They're a guest in this town, and I don't want to scare away business. But if there's 40 people that are employed there, and all of a sudden it gets shut down, oh, you guys complained and you lost our jobs. No. Well, if your boss would have followed the rules, you wouldn't be losing your jobs.
you'd be having your jobs and we wouldn't be complaining. But it's just a cycle that for 40 years I've had to deal with this. And I'm not the only one. Unfortunately, a lot of my neighbors have gone. I'm the only one left. I could tell you everything that happened back till '85 over here, you know, on Greenville Road. Not so much this site, but I'm with it with these people because I know what they're going through. The noise alone, all day, constant. With the dust, am I right? With the trucks and everything, is that what you hear? Tick, 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 tick. I don't know if the owner would like it next to his house. I don't know, would you? Did you answer that?
Yeah. Sir? Sir?
Yes,
Sir?
yes.
Direct any
I'm sorry,
comments there.
I'm sorry, but that's all I
Thank you.
wanted to say. As you can see, it's been a frustrating 40 years. So I'm just asking you to really look at this and just be considerate of the taxpayers and the neighbors. Not so much, you know, we don't want to see anybody out of business, but if it's sand and gravel, it should be sand and gravel. That's what we're looking for. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Cheryl Marandola, 1780 Pound Hill Road. I live a couple houses down across the street from Rebecca. It is loud. I won't re-litigate everything that everyone has said, but knowing that I was recently sitting in your seats, I just want to add some things for considerations if you do make a recommendation to the town council. One, currently, I believe they are saying that they would notify the town on an annual basis in December of any water, air quality tests that were performed and potentially any violations. I would like to see water, air quality, and product testing as results are received, notifications of violations within 5 business days. I also know that there is a very small radius. I believe there's one abutter that needs to be notified of blasting. And I think there are a lot of people in this room, myself included, who fall outside that. The blasting is startling. They're blasting tomorrow between 11 and 3, by the way. So I would like to see a larger radius, quarter mile. That probably sounds egregious, but I'm gonna throw that out there. And then I think I had one more. There was an indication that the site plan would need to be presented to the planning board. I want to make sure that that would potentially be stated that the planning board would have to approve a site plan with any necessary vegetative buffers, et cetera. And that is my list. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice.
Move to close the public hearing.
We have a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Those in favor? Aye. The public hearing is closed at 8:43. Thank you all for that. Planning board, questions, comments? Should we review some of these things with the attorney first, or? Go ahead. I think I'd rather hear from I'd like to hear from the planning board first. I think we have our notes, and then we'll put everything together for them after. Who's up? Who's got some questions or comments? Nobody?
I'll have questions for the attorney,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Okay. You're next.
All the products they're producing come strictly from their site source. Are they bringing anything in that site to crush from outside?
I don't believe so. Bob? No. The answer is no.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have any idea how close to the water table they are at the bottom of their pit? In other words, I wouldn't want to get down within 12 inches of the water table. So are they 10 feet above? Is there something that limits their ability to go deep? Does DEM regulate that?
Yes. I think I would defer that to where we have the 2 experts here that can answer it more accurately than I can.
I'm asking so that you'll be prepared.
Thank you.
answered next time.
Anything else, Dr. Benoit? Okay. Mr. Menard?
On the illustration to the, to the left of the map, it shows a depiction of the berm, the bottom.
Yes.
On the map, it shows a 10-foot berm. That plan shows a 4-foot berm.
I think it was 6 feet for the, 10-foot berm.
On the plan, it shows a note of a 10-foot berm with plantings.
Yes, I think I know what you're talking about.
And that note shows a 4-foot plan with, a 4-foot berm with 6 to 7 foot plantings. Is that the definition of 10 feet?
I don't know, I can't see this even with my glasses at the scale that the plan is on. I know it steps up. Ryan, what is the,
You know, I have to say, I don't know the accuracy of the dimensions. I mean, let me see if I can pull it up and read it.
Mr. Chairman, the schematic is showing the berm from grade to the top of the berm at 4 feet high.
Right.
Then it's showing from the top of the berm to the top of the planting between 6 and 7 feet. So from grade to the top of the planting would be about 10 to 11 feet. That's a 4-foot berm and 6 to 7 foot height of the planting.
Right,
That's what it indicates.
It specifically says a 10-foot berm.
I think, yeah, that's the width.
Yeah, the width is 10 feet.
Yeah,
The width is 4 feet from the top of the berm to the base
Okay,
on both sides, and
I know
then
what the
2
what the
feet.
drawing says, yes, but on the actual plan, in that box, it says a proposed 50-foot no-cut buffer adjacent to residential properties,
Mm-hmm.
including a 10-foot berm with plantings. My definition, if I'm told a 10-foot berm, it's going to be a 10-foot high berm.
No, it's the 10-foot berm is 10 of the 50 feet is a berm, and the heights are as shown on the plan. There is planting on top of the berm. You can see a tree there. So there is planting on top of the berm, but the 10 feet, it's 40 feet of trees and 10 feet of berm with trees on top of it. That's where the 10-foot was from. I think Mr. Carrillo is right on the overall height.
No, I see the overall height. It's the way it's worded is what was my question.
Yep.
Yep.
My definition, if somebody tells me it's a berm, and I see that in my mind as the height.
I understand. I probably would think that too, but the drawing intends to show 10 feet of berm and then 40 feet of trees that are below that berm, and the berm has trees on top of it. So that's where the 10 feet came
I
in.
think the point is that the wording could be better.
Obviously could be better, so we'll make it
So
better.
let's make it better. Anyone else? Comments? Dr. Roberts?
I have a question that I think is more for the planning department to understand the process. I understand tonight we're being presented what we've been presented, and as a body, we don't vote on this. Please tell me if I have the right understanding. We would be giving some kind of recommendation to the planning board.
To the council.
To the town council. And what I'm curious about is, at the beginning of the presentation, we were told that this ordinance was developed as a strategy within options to try and resolve a 30-year-long lawsuit, like you said. And my question is, aside from this, this particular ordinance, what is our community's options besides that? Because there were a number of things that are raised within the proposed ordinance that I have questions and or concerns about, but I don't know like what our other options are, and I don't understand like the 30-year lawsuit and whether that's even part of what we're talking about tonight.
Currently, the prerogative of the option being offered to you is from the applicant.
Mm-hmm.
The applicant is trying to resolve the issue outside of the court case, which is currently pending and has been pending for some time. David can help out with that. With regard to my understanding of their options in approaching the town, technically, would be a zone change as being presented here, or the option of applying to the zoning board for a special use permit. So those are the two technical options that they have in approaching the town. They've chosen, for various reasons that you can ask them, to proceed with the zone change option. So those are the two options. The third option is litigation, and that is a pending option. However, at this point, that's on hold until they exhaust their administrative remedies. I think David might, if you want to jump in on that, or you pretty much.
I think you should not focus at all on the litigation. What's before you as a planning board is to make a recommendation. And regardless of which option they had chose, if they had chose a request for a special use permit, the zoning board would be the board you'd be making the recommendation to. You'd still be making the same two recommendations that the statute requires you to do under 45-2452. That is the total responsibility of the planning board. They chose the option of seeking a zone change with the council. You're making the same two recommendations to the council. So it doesn't matter litigation or whether it was a council application or a zoning board application. The zoning board's function today, or until this process begins, is to make findings and recommendations pursuant to 45-2452, which is consistency with the comprehensive plan. Okay. And a recommendation, yay or nay. And then if either one of those options were approved either by the zoning board or the planning board, then they would have to come back to you for a site plan review where you actually would vote yay or nay on the plan like you normally do with other types of commercial operations. Right. But that is 3 steps down the road, right? That's, right now, this is strictly about recommendations to the council, and I think if you look beyond that, you know, there's no need to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
I think the history
That's
is important
helpful.
that Mr. Landry laid out, because he's indicating the history is why they're here, but that's, your role is very specifically set out in the ordinance and the statute. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks.
Did you want to address, you said you had some
Yeah, I had a
questions.
couple of questions. One of them has to do with benefit to the community as part of our comprehensive plan, where things that we approve would have some kind of benefit to the community. And there's been mention about taxes as a benefit, but I'm unaware of what those taxes have been over the years and what the projected taxes would be to the community. So that's one question I have.
Okay, we can provide that.
Another it's more of a comment, but it's about the statement about the resources in the quarry being a community asset, and I just want to respectfully say that I'm sharing this with the planning board. I don't perceive that as a community asset because it's something that's taken from our community, and maybe it's an asset in relationship to the taxes that we get, but it's not necessarily an asset. But I did see in the comments that, or I heard in your presentation, that some of that gravel is used in our own community. So I wanted to name that that concern. And then I'm concerned about the lines around what would be the new ordinance and how close that would go to residents' homes. And seeing the tree buffer currently and hearing people's anecdotes about, hearing the noise and everything, and imagining with the buffer, the trees removed, with the plan for growth, that would be a concern. So I'm naming that to this group. And then I want to see if there's more questions. The taxes, I was specific. Oh yeah, the other question is, we have often had things before us related, most recently a lot related to solar. And usually a solar project, we understand like it's 25 years, and after 25 years, the panels get recycled, and then the land could be turned into green space or whatever. Like there's usually a plan. But I heard one of the residents say how much quarrying is enough quarrying or something like that. So, and I understand there would be a site plan in association with the ordinance. And so a question I have is, for like future / ongoing use, what does that look like? I know in your presentation you talked about future plans for, I don't have the exact terminology, but like stepping it or whatever that's called. I would be curious to understand future plans. And I also just want to name that a concern I heard and that I have as well is I'm curious. It just seemed like there was a lot of federal or Rhode Island oversight, but not community oversight. And I'm kind of curious how our capacity as a community will change. Like, for example, on our paid staff to be able to monitor this, because if we have this ordinance and it requires more coordinating, will we need more staffing, more paid staffing, say in our planning department, or will we need an engineer in our community to help connect dots and help us understand how the Superfund sites may or may not be impacting? So I feel like the questions I have are more like how as a community we would handle this. And I'm not sure all I'm asking is really for you all, except maybe the taxes, but those are questions and concerns that I have.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Mr. Porter?
Based on what Mr. Igliozzi had said, it's our responsibility tonight to identify whether we're consistent or inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And while the applicant has in fact pointed out one or two consistencies, I've also found that there's a number of inconsistencies with the comp plan that we are, as our board is responsible for, need to look after. So bear with me as I list them all out, because I want to make sure that this is very clear for everybody that this is how I find it inconsistent with our comp plan. There's a goal on page 5, goal 1, foster a greater sense of community through physical development and creative placemaking. And our action item on that, action number 2, is pursue development projects that seek to maintain rural character and small town New England charm. That's one goal that I find we're inconsistent with. In the land use section, if we actually look at the future land use map, this property is located in a residential conservation area. It's not listed as future use as industrial, as there are some others, but it is listed to be residential conservation land. Let's see, let me go through my notes here. As I said, please bear with me. On page 31 of our comp plan, also in the land use, goal 3 is to prevent incompatible non-residential uses in residential neighborhoods. Given the fact that this area is all REA and quarrying is, I would say, not a compatible use with our residential zoning. While yes, there's economic development that we want to strive there is a goal that says strive to balance economic development and preservation of the town's natural resources and open space. And then there's also reviewing of the zoning ordinance as it pertains to the industrial and commercial zoned areas and investigate the feasibility of implementing greater use flexibility in these zones along with design standards. So we're really looking, while they do list this as an example of our comp plan, they're looking at flexibility in commercial and already zoned industrial areas, not residential areas. It's no surprise to anyone that really the big thing that we are talking about is aquifer and water. This property is located within the aquifer protection overlay map. And then that brings me to Goal 1 and Policy 1A and Action 1A2. So Goal 1, natural resource systems, wetlands, wildlife habitats, and groundwater aquifers will be protected. Policy 1A states limit development in environmentally sensitive area in rural areas in accordance with zoning policy. And then also protect existing natural environments and mitigate impacts on proposed developments of those environments. So there's a list of, I could keep going on, but I think I've driven the point home. There is one area that I do want to quote that's in the history section of our comp plan that about overlay districts. This is on page 151 for those following along at home. Overlay districts. According to the state's Zoning Enabling Act of 1991, municipalities may create overlay districts. Such districts are superimposed on one or more underlying zones and involve a set of additional requirements applicable to the properties within the zoning overlay district. North Smithfield already uses this tool to protect its aquifers and is considering another overlay zone to preserve and facilitate reuse of several of its mill villages. So we are in the process, and Mr. Ogier can correct me, and Mr. Pilardi and Dr. Roberts can correct me if I'm wrong, because we have gone through a new water aquifer protection committee. And that's been a very important thing that this town has been working on. So with all those listed, I have found that this application for a zoning overlay district is in, while yes, there is a consistent portion, the majority of it's inconsistent. So I can, in good faith, support moving this forward. And then I also have a question for Mr. Carullo and Mr. Igliozzi, because I've heard this concern and I share the same concern about setting precedent. Mm-hmm. We strictly have ends across the board on mining and quarrying, earth removal in our land use table. Would this now open the door for us to have other applicants come before us and say, hey, we would like to expand the overlay district that this applicant is proposing? Because it's in direct conflict with our zoning, do we have the ability to do that?
The simple answer to your question is any property owner under Rhode Island general laws can file an application for zoning relief at any time, and a zone change at any time, and an overlay district at any time. There is not precedent. There is state law that authorizes them and gives them that right. That is what the applicant is exercising in their right. So it's not precedent, it's their right. You have the right to say.
It's not so much
It doesn't set precedent. Precedent is a court issue. Mm-hmm. That's a term of art in the court of law. It's not an issue for boards and commissions.
Understood. But if we have another applicant come before us.
Any applicant come.
Any applicant for any overlay district, and we've already approved one.
It has no precedential effect.
It has no
precedential effect.
If I can follow along on that, though, because that was one of my questions, is that in the wording, the proposed wording, is there a way to make it more clear that this is a very specific, sort of one-time thing, and therefore to make it even harder to use as precedent?
It can't be used as precedent, but certainly you could drive that point home in any additional language you want.
Okay.
That the applicant's willing to, well, if the applicant isn't willing to accept it, you could impose it, but you really can't impose it. That's a council
Right.
function, right?
Yep.
The board should be indicating a list, and that would be on your list, that you'd want this
Gotcha.
language in there,
Okay.
but it's not something you could put on there yourself.
Okay. Keep going.
I can take a break for a minute. No. I did have some additional comments. I know Mr. Carullo has put together a list of conditions, if you, that he's listed out. And based on some of the testimony tonight before us, I was also going to make some recommendations to those, how many we got listed out? 8 items that Mark has given to us. So, again, the planning office has put together, regardless of whether or not we make a positive or negative recommendation, if the council does decide to move forward, there are some conditions that I agree with Mark, but I think hearing some of the comments tonight, we want to adjust a little bit. So there's number 1, that use shall include minimum setbacks of 200 feet. I think we need to increase that to 500 feet. There's the item number 3, that the owner shall provide and maintain air quality monitoring devices in an air quality monitoring plan. I would like to see that air quality monitoring plan submitted on an annual basis and subject to peer review with the cost borne by the applicant. The air quality monitoring plan shall meet or exceed, I'd like to add that in, for Rhode Island DEM or EPA air quality monitoring. And then also that we get notification of the practices for maintaining material on site, or what their fugitive dust mitigation as outlined by RI, DEM, and EPA may be. It also sounds like the scheduled blasting has all abutters within 500 feet. I agree we should increase that to at least 1/4 of a mile. But I'm also wondering if there can be some sort of notification that goes out, because we do have the weekly town newsletter. So if there is also a portion that gets an ability to sign up to get emails alerts when you're getting blasting in that area. And that's what I got from my notes.
Okay, thank you.
I have something to add to what Mr. Porter was just saying. In addition to, I think that's a good idea about the newsletter. I was wondering if there was a way to have the blasting be notified, like on a, whether it's on our town website, so that people can go to it and learn at any time, because the newsletter only goes out once a week. But if there's a mechanism for having like a continuous notification so that a resident could go on any time and see what the schedule would be, I think something like that would be really good.
Okay. Anyone else have any? Mr. Ozier, did you have any comments?
A lot of what has already been asked by the public and up here, so I'm not going to bring that back up. The only thing I think I would like to know is Section 619, I know I spearheaded a lot of that, but it did always call for expert testimony, so I know a resident raised that concern as well. And so I do think that in the spirit of transparency, it would be good to at least see if that is something that could be looked to added, just to make sure that, the town is protecting itself as well. And I do agree on the clarity of it, because while the board may not be setting precedent, if it ever does to get to a legal proceeding, it could get to that point. So I just think the clarity of the wording, not necessarily the precedence, matters. So everything else has already been asked and raised. So
Okay, thank you. My turn? Okay, thank you. And Mr. Ozier, please, love the fact that you raised our code of dress here so thank you.
I try.
It's not something we've seen much of on the planning board.
I'll lose the tie next time.
So, anyway, so along with many things said, I want to also add some requests for additional, I guess I'll call it stipulations, as well as revisit some of the questions that came from the residents. So, let's see. So I would like to see again the independent measurement of blast effects on residents, which includes the measurement on the houses, water quality, a traffic study, a stipulation once the traffic study is done, a limitation on the number of trucks that can move to and from on that access road, clear signage about the access zone, if it really is sort of, it actually says right on the map, it's hidden. So that needs to be added. I'd like to see noise abatement fencing along any areas where there are residents abutting. And when I say noise abatement, foliage is not enough. I'm talking about the types of things that you see along highways. They have ways, I mean, highways can be extremely loud. People live right next to them, but they put up those concrete, acoustically designed walls in addition to foliage. I have a question as to whether, they have big nets in Warwick that prevent golf balls from flying onto other properties. Is there netting that can filter air, netting with tighter, let's things only so many microns wide, that also can be erected much taller to prevent the fugitive dust from reaching other properties. While it won't be the most aesthetically pleasing effect, it could be very effective. Okay, a couple other things here, sorry. I don't take well-organized notes like Jeff does. Along with Dr. Roberts mentioned, my question is, what is the life expectancy of this quarry? And then what happens when it has been used up? I agree with the planning department's recommendation to further restrict or require a larger buffer zone, which I realize limits how much can be quarried, but that would be the balance part that we're trying to achieve. And as far as these notifications, I think it was Ms. Marandola that mentioned the 5-day proactive notification if there is a violation. Otherwise, all the results that you get, as you said, that the town has been without knowledge of what's going on the site, but yet it's heavily regulated. So the results of all that regulation should be regularly reported to the town, whether it's annual, and I'd leave the planning department to make that recommendation. Is it quarterly? I don't know how often it's done, but everything is reported, but the 5-day notification on a violation, because that's when action has to happen more quickly. I disagree with the statement that there'll never be residential on that property. It just may not be in our lifetime. So it's important that we look at what the long-term expectancy is, expectations are on that property. Because I'm sure as this town progresses in the decades and even century to come, that we're going to be looking to reclaim some of the lost land that, yes, in the 1950s and 60s, people pretty much did whatever they wanted. I mean, we all know that, and that's okay. I mean, it's what we're living with. But I think in the long term, just as Dr. Roberts mentioned on the solar arrays, there's a plan to reclaim that land after its term for commercial development is up. And I'm sure that's the same here. There is a limit as to how much material you can take out. Before, as Dr. Benoit said, you're hitting the water table or something. There's just no more left. So then what happens? So for the questions that I heard that I think it is important we get those answered, very concerned about hearing about the 6 a.m. or earlier start. Also very concerned about the, I don't know if the residents have actually sat and counted the trucks, so when you say it went from 20 a day to 100. But we need to study that, but I'm very concerned about that. And maybe you could, I'm sure you have a good idea of how many trucks are on that road every day.
We can figure it
right?
out.
So we need answers on that. Let's see, I asked about that one. Has there been a change in the blasting or the strength of the blasting or something, say, in the last couple of years? Because we have people saying, never used to hear it, never used to feel it, but now they are. And so maybe a change was made to mine an area that maybe was more difficult to mine than the past, something. But we need an answer on that as well. How are we doing on getting the questions you asked? Are we doing okay on that? Are we addressing these things? Just nods of heads or whatever? Okay.
I have one more question to
Okay.
add.
Go ahead.
It's kind of like a resource issue, again. It's been acknowledged in the presentation that 2 of our Superfund sites are extremely close to this and are in relationship with what's happening in that space. And I'm curious if beyond the regular DEM and EPA regs, if there's an opportunity for us as a community to receive specific information about the Superfund sites and how those interact with the quarrying site. Because, for example, when we had experts come to talk about our aquifer, that was very educational for our community. And when you started your presentation, you said you wanted to provide facts, to kind of set the stage. And I think if we had more access to facts about our Superfund sites and how the geology and the water table, et cetera, interacts with that, that's just more information for our community that we could really, I know if I lived right over there, and my mom, who's no longer alive, she lived on Old Oxford Road, and I was very concerned about her because of the L and R. So, L, R, and R. So if I lived over there, I would want as much info as I could have. And yes, we do have the EPA every 5 years updating us, but I think it's very different when you have an active quarrying site around those Superfund sites. So I don't know what the immediate answer is, but I think it would be very good for us to have more expert information about the interrelationship of those Superfund sites and the quarry.
Okay, thank you. I did, one other question that came up was about the hours of operation, and I know what you mentioned. I would, 7 o'clock seems reasonable on weekdays, people are getting up to go to work. It's not reasonable on a Saturday. I've lived in towns that put in noise abatement, especially town of Bristol, Rhode Island, which has Colt State Park, which is very popular for large groups of people on motorcycles. So on weekends, they can only come through town a little later in the morning, like 8 or 9 o'clock. So please consider that. It does sound like there really isn't a hardship with that because it sounds like Saturday is a lighter work day anyway. So with that said, I do want to make a positive comment. I can see from the intent that you're showing the intent in proposing this amendment that you're working to work with the town, and including having, some of the things we've mentioned are already in here. We just need to strengthen them. So I appreciate that, and I think that is, I think that's the right way for things to work, as long as we can work them out. It also sounded, I'd like you to just clarify what you meant. It seems like you would like the process to go on longer.
Yeah, I really would, and I'm thoroughly impressed with the level of interest and the intelligence of the comments. Almost everything that's been discussed is something that's worthy of consideration, and that's exactly what we'd like to work with you on. There are a lot of aspects of the comprehensive plan that we don't comply with, because as noted in the staff report, we're not a new proposed use. Now, the quarrying use went away in 1979. Property was began to be quarried in 1959. I started practicing law in 1979. I've been practicing for 45 years. For that 45 years, there's been no limit on how much anybody can mine on that site. No hours of operation, no buffer, no setback, no sound barrier, no noise control, no reclamation plan. I've got 24 things that are all worthy of consideration and that we will work with you on. But I like the emphasis on planning, because there's been no way to plan for this. It's a grandfathered use that every day is expanding. So it's nice to say this is for conservation and we've got to protect our aquifer. But we have experts who will tell you that this is the cleanest water in the area. And the role of this project should be to make sure that nothing gets, that these barriers that are created with clean water ponds and retention areas are maintained and properly regulated. I mean, we can create the things that are missing in what's happening in that operation of that site right now. That every day for the last 45 years, nothing has been there, that not one of these things has been part of the regulatory scheme, including all the transparency stuff, the greater notice of blasting, all of these things we'd like to address. We think that, and by the way, we only have 3 experts who really know the major issues: water impacts, blasting impacts, airborne dust and health impacts. These guys are the best you can find at this, and in a very compact way, it might make sense for you to understand that. And every one of their reports, especially the water, is all oriented to the Superfund sites, because that's the concern, that somehow the combination of Superfund sites and other uses will cause a change in the pattern of the groundwater hydrology that creates a real problem in view of the bad stuff that's still in this area. And so these reports are all about especially the Weston sand and gravel site next door and how the hydrology relates. That's a little less significant than the other site well to the north in view of the way the groundwater flows. But I think you'll find that very helpful, and we won't take a lot of time doing it, but I think that would be a useful thing. The reclamation thing we do that on solar projects, and there is a limited shelf life here, and there's a resource for the town potentially at the end of that process. It may not be houses, but maybe it's a park. I mean, I'm talking out of the box a little bit here without conferring in detail with my clients, but these are the types of things we do on solar projects that have an end life, and that I think have a place in this discussion as well. Very, very much so. The hours of operation, the notification on blasting, the careful reporting on everything. I mean, there are too many to name, but there was nothing that was a showstopper. The buffer, I mean, it's not that much land here. We do have the ability to continue. So when we start talking about 500-foot buffers, that almost would stop us next week in some areas of this site. So I don't know that we're going to get close to those kind of distances. But right now there are no required buffers.
Right. Well, and that's what we're trying to correct.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, I appreciate that you're also looking to correct it.
We're with you on this whole discussion.
I think that's very important. So, I also want to state, and I hope the whole board agrees with me, that we're not in the business of putting people out of business, but we do have to make sure the businesses work in balance with our community goals, with the value that this town brings as a rural community. So we have to make sure, and that does put restrictions on businesses.
Understood.
It does. But we have a lot of good corporate citizens in this town, and they work that way, and so it sounds like the plan is to keep moving forward, and there is a lot to unpack here, as
Yes.
they say on TV, right? So, with that said, I'm gonna wait for Mr. Igliosi to get back, because I want to see what our process is here, because
Yeah.
I would like to hear the board's
Mr. Chairman,
consider, yes.
I'd like to comment that I certainly want to hear the other experts that are
Mhm.
not present.
Exactly.
And so I'd be looking to do a continuation.
Yes.
And since it's not a typical plan, we do not have to set a date certain.
Right.
I do believe that Mr. Carullo can confirm that.
What I would suggest is that we continue this to the next regular planning board meeting.
Okay.
It's not a public hearing, and there is no public notice required, as Dr. Benoit mentioned. There are a lot of recommendations beyond what the planning office has recommended, and we'd like to be able to go back and write those up in a fashion that could be understandable. The applicant has offered to come back with his expert, so I think giving staff the opportunity to go back and supplement these stipulations or recommended stipulations to the town council as they would be. I think continuing this to the next regular planning board meeting in a month. I believe the council is opening their public hearing on Tuesday. My understanding is it's likely to be continued beyond that meeting. The planning board their responsibility is to make a recommendation to the council. Whether the planning board finds it to be consistent or inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, I am recommending strongly, regardless of the planning board's finding with regard to the comprehensive plan, that you still forward any recommended stipulations to the council, because it's really their prerogative to make, to either approve or not approve the zone change. And without the benefit of the hearing with the planning board and their stipulations, I'm not sure that they would capture all of these additional stipulations. So
Right.
that would be my suggestion.
Mr. Carullo, with the applicant bringing forth their experts, do we have the opportunity to have a peer review of the reports that would be forthcoming from them?
Planning boards do have the ability to request that an applicant provide cost related to a peer review. That's typically related to development projects before them. I would defer to David whether a recommendation to the council would allow a peer review. Does that?
I don't think at this stage that your board, although you would normally be empowered on an application that you vote on to request peer review, but as a recommending advisory function, I don't believe it would be appropriate for you to demand a peer review before you make an advisory, because technically, this decision has to be delivered in 35 days, and unless the applicant were to agree to an extension, then it just goes to the council without your recommendation. So they've agreed to extend these time periods, but you have to ask them if you're asking to see a peer review report before you make a recommendation.
Well, whether it's a peer review or having
They've offered their
another-
reports.
another-
I thought they've offered their experts to appear.
Exactly.
I don't know.
It'd be good to
Yes.
have, I'll say, non-biased experts in the room.
Maybe
Whether
that-
it's in the room or doing a peer
Maybe that
review.
should be a recommendation to the council,
Okay.
that the
All right.
council consider
Okay.
doing that, and the council would have to ask the applicant at that. That's a discussion between the applicant and the council. I think the planning board can make that recommendation. But, again, go forward 3 steps. If this were ever before you as an application, then it would be well within your jurisdiction under Rhode Island general laws to require the applicant to pay for peer review on those matters
But you're saying,
of expertise.
in this case, that would apply to if it gets to a site plan.
Right.
That's when it would put, okay.
That doesn't mean the council couldn't ask, and the
Sure.
applicant couldn't agree.
Dr. Benoit, could you elaborate on the statement you made about continuing?
Continue this to the next planning board meeting.
Which means we're not making, that would mean not making a recommendation today.
Right, no
Correct.
recommendation.
Okay.
We have to hear more evidence,
Right.
presentation by the
And-
applicant.
Right. And I think, and I hope, I want everyone to be clear, we're not kicking the can down the road. There's a lot of stuff here. You heard the attorney just talk about this very long list, and I could see it when he flipped his paper up, because my eyesight's really good for distance, not up close. And it's a long list. And there's a lot of details to work out to have the final list of stipulations that we would want to put on the recommendation to the town council. The details, like how big the buffer zone should be, the height of the wall, all kinds of things. So that's what we want to take a little bit more time. In this case, it's a month, right? Because it's our next meeting is March 13th.
March 13th.
Right, exactly, because 28 days in February, right? So how does the rest of the board feel about that? Pushing it forward? Okay.
Will the council be allowing us to wait that long?
They will, because
Okay.
the council had a discussion with the applicant on Monday, and the applicant had indicated that they wanted to continue the public hearing after Tuesday. And so
Okay.
if that's still Mr. Landry's desire, I think there'll be at least one more meeting after that meeting.
Yes, and I think, yes. I think they indicated they needed more time as
Right.
well. Yeah.
So the next council meeting would be 2 weeks after, 2 weeks from
So you'd have the 18th,
Well-
the 18th meeting, and then another one 2 weeks later, and
They'd
then
have-
ours.
Yeah, they'd have a meeting on the 3rd.
Okay.
So then that would be a question whether or not the council would be continuing the meeting to the 3rd, and then theoretically waiting for the planning board for a third meeting. I don't know how, unless the planning board wants to have a meeting faster. I guess the question is really to be put forth to Mr. Landry, how he feels about a month, thinking that that means the council would continue your next hearing, either, if it was continued, either 2 more times, meaning the next 2 council meetings, or jump over a council meeting, so they would have the benefit of the planning board. Do you want to look at your schedule and see how you think about that? You want to take 5 minutes and think about that?
You know, I think we'll make the schedule work. Whatever it ends up, we'll make that date. We might want to go rock to rock, though, and if this meeting goes out to the March meeting on Tuesday night, the council may choose to put it further out to give the planning board more time. We can always jump rock to rock instead of jumping over 2 months where maybe we don't need 2 months, and we can make some progress sooner than that. It sounds like the next meeting, there'll be a lot of sharing of facts too, and so, you know, it could be that there's a third meeting, but I always think that if you jump over 2 months, you're still only doing 1 month's worth of work.
Right.
And
Right.
you just lose 2 months maybe unnecessarily.
No, I was, Mr. Landry, I wasn't suggesting 2 months. I was letting you know that it would be 2 council meetings, 1 month before they would have the benefit of what the planning board does.
Okay,
Right.
Because the council would be meeting 2 weeks after the 18th,
yeah,
and they wouldn't meet yet.
right, that doesn't make sense.
So it'd be 4 weeks
Right.
to the council after the 18th.
That makes sense.
Okay. So if
Okay.
he's in
Thank
agreement,
you.
then
Yep.
I think that makes sense.
Yep.
So then we would continue this to our March 13th meeting, and then that would give them, us the ability to make our recommendation for their meeting on March 17th. Okay. Just so everyone's aware of which dates we're talking about.
Okay. Everyone good with that? Guess we look for a motion. I believe we would need a motion to continue that.
Make a motion to continue this 4 weeks, approximately 4 weeks from tonight. Is that correct?
To our March 13th.
The date's March 13th.
To our March 13th planning board meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion to continue this to the March 13th planning board meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Roll call vote.
Yes.
Dr. Benoit, Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Mr. Porter.
Yes.
Mr. Menard. Yes. And chair votes yes. Mr. Landry, if you could share those long lists with Mr. Carullo for all those
Well-
stipulations, that'd be very helpful.
We could certainly exchange information over the next, probably next week,
Yeah.
when I can write some of this stuff up,
That'd be great.
and I would
Thank everyone
ask
for
that Mr. Landry
all
forward
of your
me his
thoughtful
information.
comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so where are we now on the agenda?
Adjournment.
Are we?
Yeah. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Those in favor?
Aye.